After my personal struggle with food left me sick and suicidal, I was struck with the realization that food alone can't fix us. So I set out to discover what could, and what I found changed everything. After coaching thousands of clients and interviewing the world's leading experts, I realized it was time to start a bigger conversation. What are you really hungry for?
It's great.
Ooh, good one.
What am I really hungry for?
I love that question.
It's time to discover what you're really hungry for. This episode is brought to you by the Institute of Transformational Nutrition. ITN offers the first and only personalized nutrition certification program that's backed by science and proven to get clients actual results and coaches actual income. If you're ready to be proud of what you do, feel like you matter, make a difference in someone's life, and actually get paid for it, then visit transformationalnutrition.com to take your first class toward your certification for free. A few years ago, a close friend of mine was in a car crash. It was pretty bad. A car came out of nowhere, her car flipped, and she was sent to the hospital strapped to a backboard. For weeks afterwards, she was afraid to get into her car and certainly didn't want to drive. Now, thankfully, there were no serious injuries from the crash, but the emotional impact is still lasting. She still gets a knot in her stomach when she hears the squeal of screeching tires on a movie or even on a television show. Tragedy can strike us all at any time. We can have an accident, receive a serious medical diagnosis, or have a relationship that just ends without warning. I get sweaty palms and a racing heart whenever my mother calls me on the phone. It makes me feel really nervous and anxious, yet it's just a phone call from my mother. But this is the way that post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, works. We get a physical, mental, and emotional reaction to things that trigger the memory of whatever trauma that we've experienced. And those connections are very hard to break because of the emotional impact of the event. And it can happen with just about anything. For me, one of the traumas I experienced was the emotional impact of growing up with my mother. So now, as I said, seeing her name on my phone, calling me, creates an immediate reaction. For my friend, it was the emotional impact of being in a terrible car crash. And so now that sound of tires screeching just sets her off. And for today's guest, my dear husband, Zak Garcia, it was his experience as a sergeant in the U.S. Army in Iraq. Like many of our veterans, Zak had traumatic experiences while he was there. This resulted in a tremendous emotional impact on him that's lasted until this day. He had anxiety, he couldn't sleep, couldn't work, and he felt helpless in his own life. He was having panic attacks, anxiety attacks, and other intense experiences. He went to the VA for help with his PTSD, and doctors there asked him to take prescriptions. Though he initially refused, eventually he gave in and tried them, only to find that they made him feel worse. He asked himself, how am I ever going to get past this? What am I going to do? And this is when he made some major shifts in his life that have made a tremendous positive impact. He focused on nourishing his body so that it could support his healing. He also started healing his mind through alternative methods like meditation and completely shifted the way that he looked at the world. He's made incredible strides in healing his body, mind, heart, and soul. And while the effects of PTSD may always remain with him, today he's going to share this story and how he was able to not just survive, but to create a life helping others do the same. Zak, thank you so much for being here today.
It's an honor.
So I think just right off the top, we should make the disclaimer that you're not just a guest on the show, but you also live with me. You're my husband.
I am.
Well, I really want to just honor you for being here and truly thank you from the bottom of my heart, because what we're talking about today is a topic that affects so many people in such big, profound ways, and maybe in ways that they haven't even realized it's affecting them, but it is, and that's trauma. right? And, you and I have talked about so many times before that there's lots of types of trauma. Pretty much everyone has trauma of some kind. And you personally have witnessed this in your life through PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
So take us back and sort of set the stage, if you will, and tell us about your experience and help people understand what PTSD is, what you can do to come through that, right? And also, like you said, for people who have loved ones who are experiencing that, what role do they play and how do they support those people?
So I was a 17-year-old boy and a senior in high school when 9/11 happened. And I remember feeling shocked and sad and scared and really angry. And I decided to join the Army. And 5 years later, I was a 22-year-old man and a sergeant in Iraq for an extended period of time. And I was exposed to a lot of very intense combat situations. After 4.5 years in the military and multiple deployments, I came home to Eugene, Oregon, and I was diagnosed with PTSD. It manifested for me in a lot of different ways: general anxiety. Eventually, I started having panic attacks. I had nightmares. And even if it was a complete stranger, or if it was a dear friend or family member, when somebody saw me, I felt like they were only seeing my trauma. And I was really ashamed. And I felt weak. I felt like I was broken. And it took me many years of searching for tools and solutions. And eventually, I found out how to manage it. I found out how to get back in control of my life. And the results were amazing. It's been over 3 years since I've had a panic attack. And the level of success that I've reached in my life, both personal and professional, is beyond anything that I thought was possible, especially in those really dark times.
So you mentioned your anxiety, right? Panic attacks, all of these symptoms that you started experiencing. Did you know that it was PTSD? Did you realize this is coming from the trauma? It's because they had to have told you those kinds of things, like you're going into war. Did they say this could happen? And did you know that's what was happening?
Even with the knowledge that I was going into a situation where that was going to happen, it was still surprising to me the way that it affected me. And so I knew before I went into it that, and I did a lot to prepare for that, but you never prepared for what's actually going to happen. And then afterwards, that was the part that I didn't really think through. When I was going into it, the way I prepared myself to be in that situation was really to detach and to sort of numb myself to not feel all of the humanity that was happening. Because if I did, then I might not be able to accomplish my mission. And that could get myself or somebody else hurt or killed. So coming out of it, I had this understanding and this knowledge that PTSD was a reality. And I also didn't really understand how it would manifest in my life. And so in the beginning, I was like, I'm good. Oh wow, I came back and I can still I can still be happy. I can still go out and have fun sometimes. And especially initially, I was just so happy that I was back. I was back home. And as soon as that happened, it almost immediately started to dissipate because people looked at me differently. And when people looked at me, I really felt like that they could see all of this trauma, and it was so intense. And so I felt like people could see right through me.
Yeah. I also just want to be really clear here that what we're talking about here is trauma and, PTSD specifically. But we're not just talking about veterans. And I think that's a very important point to make with this conversation, because I have my own traumas, we all do, I would argue, from something at some point in our lives. So I just want to make it really clear that this isn't specific to veterans, even though that was your particular situation, that what we're talking about really is, really runs the gamut for trauma in general.
I'm really glad you said that, because when we talk about PTSD, it is not just about combat veterans. It is not just about sexual assault victims. Mm-hmm. It is not just about any particular type of trauma. We all have trauma. And there's another stigma around PTSD. People think that there is like one level of PTSD and it's like anxiety attacks and this is how it manifests.
Right.
And it turns out that you can have very small amounts of PTSD over certain things that happen that may seem trivial. Our bodies are very intelligent, and they'll do anything they can to avoid that stress again.
Right.
And so a lot of what happens with PTSD is not in your brain. It's actually automatically happening in your physiological response to stress or the potential of stress. When I was diagnosed with PTSD, that experience itself was actually traumatic and very hurtful to me, because I went to the Veterans Administration to get a diagnosis or an analysis, and I had a 45-minute meeting with a psychologist whose job it was to determine if I had PTSD, and if so, what level of PTSD did I have based on the ways that it was manifesting in my life. And then what they do in the VA is they actually say, okay, you got this much PTSD and you're disabled at this percentage. And so a part of you wants them to believe it. On the other side, I was feeling very, very scared, because I hadn't shared how I was feeling with anybody, and I hadn't even really dug deep inside of myself to understand what was happening with my PTSD. So my first experience in that diagnosis was one of a lot of fear and frustration, and I felt like even worse afterwards, because I didn't feel like that person knew me, and I didn't think that there was in a 45-minute period that she could really understand, what I was going through.
Yeah. And so they made the diagnosis.
So once I got the diagnosis of PTSD, they said, here are some options. We can give you medications.
Yeah.
There are some group therapies you can go to. You can get, one 30-minute session once a month for 3 months, and then after that, you're on your own. And so and I just want to say, the people in the Veterans Administration are amazing. They're doing such good work to help veterans who are coming back to just try to reintegrate into society.
Yeah.
I think the problem lays with not enough funding and the fact that it's a bureaucratic system. And I just want to honor the people in the Veterans Administration who are out there every day helping veterans. It's really meaningful.
Yeah. So you were offered medication and you chose to not take it.
For a long time, I chose not to take medication. And I got to a point, Cynthia, where I was at rock bottom. I was having panic attacks. I was having nightmares. And I just said, you know what, I'm going to try this, because it's worth a shot. And ironically, it made me more anxious. And I think that was a little psychosomatic for me, because I was apprehensive about taking medication.
Right, sure.
And I did it that one time for like 2 days, and both days were horrendous anxiety. And so I decided I'm not going to do that, because my body didn't want that. And I think I intuitively knew that it wasn't the right solution. I don't, however, want to discourage people from taking medications, because I know a lot of people who have taken medications that were prescribed to them that actually helped them. What I want it to be clear is that it's not a solution to your problem. It can be helpful, and you should take any help that you can get. But it's about going deeper and finding out what's really at the heart of it, and accepting that and integrating it into your story of who you are as a person.
So do you feel like the medication serves the purpose to just allow you to maybe relieve some of the symptoms so that you can go deeper, so that you can get to the root cause and do the real work?
I think it's possible that can happen for people.
Yeah.
The problem is that you can go so far with that and to allow it to be a crutch, right? Because, and I'll tell you, when I say I didn't take medication, I say I didn't really take antidepressants and medication from the VA. I tried all kinds of medications. I self-medicated all day long. So I drank, I did drugs, I watched movies and TV, I went out with my friends, and I did things that anything I could do to just keep my mind active and stay active and not think about what I really needed to deal with, which was those traumatic experiences,
Right.
and find some closure. So when we talk about medication, remember there's medication from a doctor
Sure.
that's prescribed to you, and then there's self-medication, and then there's forms of medication that aren't actually things that you ingest. I mean, they're activities.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I personally had a lot of trauma, which you know about, in my life, and I've done a lot of work around it. A lot of work. Did I mention I've done a lot of work around it? A lot of work. The thing is, sometimes the work is intense, and sometimes I just get tired. And sometimes, if I can medicate with a glass of wine or something, and I can numb for just a minute, then it allows me to sort of regain my energy and then go back to the real work. And so I believe that, I know for me, it's okay for me to take those little breaks because I go back to the real work and I'm better for that. So I get that, and I get that can be very beneficial.
Absolutely. And you also get that it's a slippery slope.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I want to talk about that, though, the slippery slope. So, you know, you're at a point where, I mean, the drinking, the drugs, the friends, that you did all of these things, wasn't working. You got to a point where you said, fine, I'll take the medication. Yes, I'll take the medication. That didn't work. So now you find yourself at this crossroad. What do you do? I mean, what is left to do?
I did a lot of things, and I think that one of the most important things to start that journey of recovery is acceptance and your mindset. If you're in a mindset that you are going to get better, and not that you're just going to cover up the symptoms so you don't feel
Right.
those horrible things, there's a difference between saying, I'm choosing not to feel anxious, I'm choosing not to have anxiety attacks.
Yeah.
Between shifting your mindset into one that is, I am going to get to the root cause of this, and it's going to be difficult, and I'm going to have pain, and it's important for me to feel that pain and to understand that pain, and then to integrate it into who I am. Because it's very easy to compartmentalize these experiences. And no matter at what point on that journey you are, you have a decision. You are empowered to make your own decision. That is, I'm going to, right now, I'm going to choose to get to the root cause. I'm going to do that work that you talked about. It's not always going to be easy. And when I get to the other side, I'm going to be okay with who I really am.
Yeah. I obviously, I love that, and that's the path that I chose, but it wasn't easy. You know, I mean, what you're talking about, Zach, that takes a lot of courage.
I mean, it's part of the reason we're doing this interview right now. Hopefully, I can inspire somebody to be able to think and realize that they have the potential to do that, to make that choice. And then once you do that, and you're ready, now let's get into the meat of what the things that I did that were actually the tools that I used to actually get to the other side of this.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so meditation is something that we talk about a lot in society. I feel like it's almost become a buzzword.
Totally. What does that even mean? Because I think people hear meditation, and I've said this before, people hear meditation and it's just like their eyes gloss over.
Yeah.
And it's just like I have to just sit there and be still and not think about anything. And I just can't do that.
Yeah.
I think that's what most people think. It's what I thought, you know? And when I tried to do it the first time, I was a complete failure because all I was thinking about was all the things that I had to do when I got finished sitting there trying to not think about what I had to do, you know?
Exactly.
And I thought, I'm just not good at this. I can't do this. And I think a lot of people have that experience and then give up. I did.
I did too.
Yeah.
I had a very similar experience. I didn't understand why I would just sit there and close my eyes.
Yeah.
And I didn't know, do I think of something? Do I not think of something?
Yeah.
So there are many forms and sort of various levels of meditation, I think. And I think the easiest place to start is with a guided meditation. And what a guided meditation is basically a track that you listen to where somebody, a calming voice, explains to you what to do. Okay, close your eyes, relax your body, and walks you through it. And that's really simple and effective. Anybody can do that.
Yeah.
Another level where I would it's also a very beginner level, which was very impactful for me, was something called binaural beats. And particularly the program that I use is called HoloSync. And it's by Centerpoint Research Institute. And essentially what binaural beats is it's playing two different frequencies of sound in each ear, but they're slightly different. It's automatically helping your brain and changing your brain. There's a lot of science that has come out in the last 10, 20 years that shows that meditation is actually really helpful and you can literally change your brain. And so HoloSync is a passive way of meditating. And there are other types of passive meditation that are really great. And I think that there's no one size fits all.
Yeah. As you know, I really love transcendental meditation. Transcendental meditation shifted everything for me and taught me a lot that I didn't know about meditating. And then I know you do transcendental meditation as well. For your experience, like how has that been for your trauma and maybe in comparison to some other types of meditation that you've used?
It's one of those meditations where you really can't do it wrong.
Yeah.
You can totally have your thoughts.
That's what I like about it.
Yeah, you have your thought. They tell you your thoughts come up and that's totally fine. And you sort of have this mantra that they give you. And also it's an amazing organization. They do a lot of work to help people in inner cities and in prisons and veterans. So I absolutely recommend TM because I think that a daily practice of slowing down and having that time to meditate is extremely helpful. And that's something that I've added just recently after I've done a lot of other work on myself. So let me talk about something that's accessible to pretty much everybody. And this was a game changer for me. It's called HeartMath. And the HeartMath Institute has been studying something called HRV, which stands for heart rate variability.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's the spacing in between your heartbeats and the difference in that and the variability in that. So, for example, if you measure your pulse and it's 60 beats per minute, it doesn't mean that every single second, right on the second that your heart is beating.
Right.
It's like 0.9 seconds and then 1.03 seconds. And actually, interestingly, the more variable that is, the better it is for you. And they've studied people's brains, they've studied people's self-reflections by doing this practice, and they've learned that the more heart rate variability that you create, that you can get into a state of what they call coherence. And that sounds nice, doesn't it?
It
We all want to be coherent.
It sounds very peaceful and calm.
Yeah, and it is. Oh yeah. And studies have shown that it takes about 6 weeks to form a new habit. So if you use HeartMath every day for just 5 minutes a day for 6 weeks, you can have a new tool to be able to manage your anxiety. And that was actually a critical point for me when I was able to control the anxiety part of my PTSD was using HeartMath. It's about $100 for the device, and the app is free, and you can track your progress over time. And it's a phenomenal tool that I would absolutely recommend.
I love how you keep talking about these tools, right? Because really that's what they are. They're tools and they help us and that's great. Talk to me about diet and nutrition. Did that play a role in you sort of recovering from PTSD and recovering, we'll use that word in whatever way it pertains to you?
I think everybody's body is different, and people, certain things that work for some people don't work for others. For me, it was the bulletproof diet that changed everything for me, because I learned that adding a lot more healthy fats into my diet, reducing the amount of carbs, getting rid of all processed foods, and really drastically reducing sugar, and then just having a lot of vegetables and healthy fats and moderate amounts of protein from like high quality meats like grass-fed beef and
Sure.
wild caught salmon and those kinds of things. When I was able to get the baseline for my nutrition, then I was able to turn my brain on in a way, and I got like my energy back in my brain to be able to think about things more clearly. And that actually, surprisingly, because my brain was working better, it made my meditation better.
I have to tell you, what I love the most about what you're saying is that, and maybe this is just because I'm really lazy, I don't know, but it doesn't take a lot of time or effort. You know, I mean, yes, with the food, you need to think about it and prepare things sometimes maybe in advance. But I mean, 5 minutes, clip on the ear, play a game, done. You know, the one thing I loved about TM and what initially attracted me to it was that I get to do it 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon. And that's it. So we don't have a lot of time to do these things. So I think, you know, what I'm really loving is that you're not saying go to an ashram for, you know, sell all your belongings and move to an ashram and stay there for the next 4 years and then come back and you'll be good. Like, these are real practical things that we could all implement in our daily lives. I love that.
Absolutely. And understand that if you try something and it doesn't work for you, then that's okay.
Yeah. I want to understand, you know, we've talked about trauma and we've talked about the direct effect of trauma and how, if you've experienced trauma, including PTSD, how you can go about overcoming that, right? There's also a side that we haven't talked about, which is how do the people who love and want to support this person with trauma or PTSD, what do they do? What can they do? Because sometimes you feel very helpless.
I think it's about awareness. So this could be, if you have one takeaway and it's caretaking versus caregiving, and this could be a really good one for you. Caregiving is giving to that person based on whatever they're available to receive, and then not being attached to the outcome. So if you offer somebody help and they don't particularly want it, or they push you away, then you're okay with that. That's cool too.
Yeah,
it's like I'm gonna do whatever I can to help you, and if it works or if it doesn't, then that's okay. Because what I think people do very often, and it's very natural, this is just human nature, we care about somebody so much, all we wanna do is make that person feel better.
Yeah.
And so we're offering them help. And sometimes by doing that, we make it worse for them. And so there's a spectrum of how much help do I offer versus how much, you know, do I just let it be?
Yeah.
And I don't know where the person in your life or where you particularly fall on that scale. I'll tell you what the extreme versions are, and that you should definitely stay away from these, okay? On the one hand, what you definitely don't want to do is act like nothing happened. There's a tendency sometimes for people to say, we're not going to talk about that. And a lot of the time, I think it's actually the person who's been through the trauma who says that. They say, I don't want to talk about that. And so everybody around them goes, okay, that conversation is off limits. We're not going to do that. And then when it does come up, it's like, we're not going to talk about that. So what you've done by doing that is you've completely closed off any opportunity to grow and to expand.
Yeah.
On the other end of the spectrum, what you definitely don't want to do is constantly be asking that person, how are you feeling? No, how are you really feeling? Are you okay? You know, you don't seem like you're doing very well.
Yeah.
What can we do? This is another form of caretaking. You're really trying so hard to help that person, and you may have positive intentions, and what you're doing is you could potentially be pushing that person deeper and deeper into stuffing that down, because now everybody around them always wants them to talk about it, but they don't want to, and they're not ready to talk about it.
Yeah. And that's hard though, you know, like, because maybe they do see you struggling and maybe they do see you suffering and they just want to help, you know. I think anyone who cares deeply for another human being just wants to make things better. We want to fix it so they don't feel like that anymore. You and I do this with each other all the time. We do this with our children, right?
Well, let me be really clear.
Okay.
I'm not saying don't ever ask them about it.
Okay.
What I'm saying is the other end of that spectrum is constantly asking out
I
and
see.
feeling like
Okay.
it's your responsibility to pull it out of that person.
Got it.
I think that's the key point.
Yeah.
If you have somebody in your life who's dealing with trauma and you really want to help them
Mm-hmm.
and you feel like it's your responsibility to pull that out of them and to get them to talk about it,
Yeah.
and you're not their certified therapist or whatever, then it's not your duty to do that. I'm not saying don't ever ask them about it. It's important that you open the space for them to be able to talk about it if they want to.
Sure.
And there's something else that I want to also mention, and that's forgiveness. So this is really important. Forgiveness is about releasing that emotion for yourself.
Yeah.
The key is not being attached anymore to what that person did. It's not that you're condoning it.
Sure.
It's just that you're no longer emotionally attached to it.
Right.
And when you do
Right.
that, it no longer has power over you. There are people who have been traumatized by other people in their lives. And the person who traumatized them has passed away. And 20 years later, they're still really pissed off at that person and they're
Yeah.
still holding on to all those emotions.
Yeah.
You forgive that person for yourself and you release the attachment to that traumatic experience. And you integrate it with who you are.
I think that's really important. And, this holding on to this anger, this pain, or holding a grudge, if you think about it, the way I tend to see it, and this helps me understand it, is it's like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. Because it's really only you that it's affecting. They don't even know that you're having these thoughts or these reactions to their name or their face or what happened, right? It's really just you. So for me, that helps.
For somebody who has PTSD, do understand that you are a different person and you are a better person and you can be a better person because of your experience. And you don't even know how or why that's going to happen yet. But trust me, it will. If I could go back and change this part of my life, I wouldn't do it.
Wow.
Never. Because it made me who I am today. I went through all of those struggles for a very good reason in the end. And it has shaped who I am. And I'm proud of that. I can say today that I am proud that I have PTSD, which is something that I could have never said before. And I can talk about it. The minute I started accepting that and talking about that,
Yeah.
it's like the forgiveness. It's like the emotions associated with it just were released.
And it does get easier.
It does.
It does, yeah. Yeah. Zach, I love you. You know that. I also am very grateful for you in my life. You have been such an amazing teacher for me, so I want to thank you for that. I also want to thank you for the wisdom that you've imparted here today, and I truly believe that this is going to help a lot of people who are suffering. So thank you for that. And also, thank you for your service. And I don't know if those are the right words to say. I never quite know because I wasn't where you were, but it's all I have. And it's because of people like you that I have the freedom to have my voice and to have my message be heard. And it's because of your service that people have the freedom to watch this and to hear the message and to make their own choices in the world that we live in. So I really want to thank you from the bottom of my soul for so many things, for being my partner, for holding me to higher standards, for your service to our country, and thank you for being you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So there's one question that I ask every guest that comes on the show, and you know what it is. You've heard me say it many, many times. Zach, what are you really hungry for?
Yeah. I didn't prepare an answer for this, and through this conversation, I've sort of had a realization. What I'm really hungry for is purpose. Purpose of doing something in my life that's greater than just me. And it started when I talked about having my son, Cooper, and how that gave me a purpose to get past my PTSD. And I think that in my life and what I'm doing with my work and sharing my story here today, it's about a greater purpose of service. And so I'm hungry for more of that.
Beautifully said. Again, thank you. Thank you for being here. Again, thanks for being you. I love you.
I love you too.
This week is all about trauma, specifically post-traumatic stress disorder. The issues that our veterans face when it comes to post-traumatic stress disorder can seem overwhelming. According to the Department of Veterans Affairs, 22 veterans commit suicide every single day. Oftentimes, coming home doesn't mean that their war is over. For some, it's just beginning. In honor of Zak Garcia and veterans everywhere, we've established the Sergeant Zachary Garcia Scholarship Fund at the Institute of Transformational Nutrition. Every month, we'll award 10 full scholarships to our Certified Transformational Nutrition Coaching Program to veterans so they can discover how to heal their bodies and hearts and help others do the same. For more information on the Scholarship Fund, please visit transformationalnutrition.com. In today's episode, we discussed how anyone can develop a reaction to a traumatic event and how to support those going through these experiences. So I invite you to choose one of Zak's tips that he discussed during our show and start implementing it in your life today. What one step can you take to start dealing with the effects of trauma in your own life? How can you start supporting someone in your life who feels the effect of a past trauma? As always, the conversation continues at cynthiapasquella.com. Head on over and leave a comment below this video telling me the one thing that you will do to take back your power from trauma and create the life that you're meant to live. Did you like this video? If so, please subscribe and then share it with your friends. And if you want to hear more from me, including things that I only share in email, then head on over to cynthiapasquella.com and sign up for my email newsletter so you can become a part of this beautiful community of women who are discovering what they're really hungry for. The Institute of Transformational Nutrition offers the first and only personalized nutrition certification program that's backed by science and proven to get clients actual results and coaches actual income. If you're ready to be proud of what you do, feel like you matter, make a difference in someone's life, and actually get paid for it, then visit transformationalnutrition.com to take your first class toward your certification for free.